And that's what I do when I go to retreats and to teach, is I really want to give you confidence in your own voice and in your own story. And one way to do that is to give you tools to help you revise your story better. So that's what we're going to do today. Is I am going to teach the master class this summer in June at Highlights. I'd love for we have a few openings left. I'd love for you to join us. But this will be just an introduction to my teaching style. So even from my early years as a writer, I tried to help others, and one way to do that is to join an online critique group. I exchanged manuscripts with my friend Dory Butler. She's won the Edgar for the Best Children's Mystery of the Year for her story, The Buddy Files, The Case of the Lost Boy. But in those early years, we were both unknowns, and we exchanged manuscripts, and I was broke. I had no money. And so when I went to print out her story to critique it, because back then you didn't have the track changes that you have now, I tried to save paper. So I shrank the font to the smallest size that I could read, about an 8-point font, and I took out the page breaks and the extra spaces, and suddenly a funny thing happened. Suddenly an entire chapter was printed on a single piece of paper, and that meant my critiques tended to look at the overall story. And that's something that's very hard to find, a critiquer who can see the whole novel. Instead, most people concentrate on writing a beautiful sentence or a great paragraph or sometimes a scene. But with the Shrunken manuscript, I started to see the entire story. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to shrink the manuscript down to a size where you can actually see what's happening. And that's what I want to do, is I want to have a manuscript in a visual form. I'm trying to take something that's very abstract and make it very visual. So what a shrunken manuscript is it's just using the power of the computer to change the font sizes and the formatting until an entire 70,000 word novel is shrunken down to 44 pages, or sometimes even less. And then you can actually start to analyze it and see what's going on, and is the story working or not. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Before we talk about what we're going to do to shrink it, we're going to ask the question first, do you do paper or digital? Traditionally, I've done a shrunken manuscript with paper, and so we will format it until the manuscript is about 30 pages, and that's what I do in the novel revision retreats. And you can see here that she's marked all kinds of things, and that's what we're going to look at. But I've always known that you could do this digitally, and that's what I'm going to do today. You just start with your word processor and shrink your manuscript down to the size where you can start to evaluate it. And we're going to go through that pretty quickly so you can see how you do that. Now, the advantage of digital is that you can save paper, which is what this started with to begin with. You can also toggle between the 10% view and the 250% view, so you can actually see, read your manuscript even at a small size. So the digital has been very interesting to work with. So this is my work in progress. It's about 70,000 words, 291 pages. And all I did was I went to the View command on Microsoft Word and put it at 10%. You know, I like to work at about 125% or 150%, so it's easy to see on the screen, but now I've shrunken it down. So it's 291 pages. Now let me give you a warning. From now on, things will get seriously tight, small, minuscule. Only do this if you're a professional writer. So the difference here is I made it single-spaced. It's gone down to 158 pages. You can notice that I am leaving the title page and the table of contents the same size as normal so that I can actually read them. I could actually delete those if I wanted, but I choose to leave especially the table of contents because I will update that so then I can see where the chapters are if I need to go find one for something. But that's optional. You can do that if you want. So what I'm doing then is I'm just highlighting all of the manuscript and changing the formatting. And so here I've just taken out the page breaks. That's the only difference between those two. Is here there's a lot of white space, and I just went and removed the page breaks and any other stray extra lines that might be there for some odd reason. So we're down to 138 pages. Still too much to do what we need to do. And now we're down to a 10-point font instead of 12-point font. And that drops it to 99 pages, again viewed at 10%. So we have 4 rows with about 25 pages, still too long. So we're going to shrink it even more, down to 8-point font. And that makes it 69 pages, that's still too long. So I'll go to 6-point font, 2 rows. Do you feel like Ant-Man yet? So the goal of shrinking it is to get it to a size where you can actually see the structure. 30 or 40 pages. If I'm doing a printout, I want 30 pages because that's what I can seem to take in with my field of vision. I lay it out in 3 rows of 10. My field of vision allows me to see about 30 pages at a time. On the computer, I found that 40 pages was fine. Doesn't matter either way as long as you can see what you need to see. So the only thing I did here, though, was to arrange it. Now, I like arranging it into 3 or 4 rows. The 4-row structure here indicates the act structure. So this is Act 1, Row 1. Then you have Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. If you have a 3-act structure, instead, you would do the first row is Act 1, and then the second and third ones are Act 2, and the last one is Act 3. I like arranging it that way so that it's nice and easy to see and sort of evaluate where things fall in the structure. And so I actually like it even better at 20%. So it's a 6-point font with all of the page breaks removed, single spaced, and at 20%. And this is where I'm going to camp for a little while. So before we talk about what to mark, let's talk about how to mark it. If you're marking on paper, that yellow highlighter that you love to use will not show up. You're going to be looking at it from a distance. It's probably going to be laid down on a floor somewhere. You may have to borrow a meeting room at a library just to do this for if you don't have a big space. But find some place where you can lay down that 30 pages and mark it with really bright markers. The dark reds, the bold colors work much better. You can use post-it notes. I've seen online people put pictures of doing it with putting sparkly beads and buttons all over. You can do whatever you want. Make up your own key on what you're marking. If you're using a digital format, again, I'm going to the formatting. So on Microsoft Word, I'm going to Format and Borders and Shading, and then the shading. And I'm choosing a color then to shade the pages with. So it's very easy. You can either save as and save different versions of it, or what I've done here is I've just done screenshots. Either way works. So let's evaluate a manuscript. You can look at the Shrunken manuscript to look at anything of concern. It's really limited only by your imagination. It's a really powerful tool. But let's look at some examples. The first thing would be, what would you expect a master novel to look like? So this really tells us a lot about what our ideas are about what novels should be. Most of us think it should start with a strong opening and then have a very strong ending. And then at the end of Act 1, going into Act 2, there should be a strong scene. At the end of Act 2, or the middle of the story, going into the last half of the story, there's another strong one. And then at the end of Act 3, heading into the climax, there should be another strong one. So this is just sort of what I would see as a master novel layout. Somewhere in the middle of Act 2 and Act 3, I like putting a little shorter scene, but that's still very strong. Often this is a subplot. It doesn't really matter as long as there's not a whole lot going on here without something strong. You do need something to go on. So this would be what I would look for, is this kind of a structure. But if you have a different idea about what a novel should look like, that's fine. You can have your own ideas on it. This is kind of the classic structure. So if you have a manuscript that's about 40,000 words, you can mark the 5 strongest chapters. And that's one of the main ways that I use this, is to look at what are my strongest chapters. Now, the strongest chapters I don't define. That's your definition. If you have an action book, probably it's the places with the most action going on. If you have a character novel, though, it's probably the place where there's most emotion. So in terms of your novel, where do you think are the strongest chapters? So if you have about 40,000 words, you can mark 5 of them. So you're either going to put a big X with your highlighters on the paper one, or you're going to make it a different color on the digital one. For 40 to 50,000 words, you can use 6. 50 to 75,000, you can use 7 or 8. And after that, well, War and Peace, I don't know if you could do it or not. What you have to do when you get to a novel this big is you have to divide it into sections. So you would have Act 1 and evaluate that, Act 2 and evaluate that, Act 3 and evaluate that. So you can still do the Shrunken manuscript with very, very long pieces of writing, but you're going to have to do it in separate stages because we're trying to see. We're trying to make it visual. And so you can't hardly do that with the really long ones. So before we look at my example, I want to look at some mistakes. What are some things that you can actually see with the Shrunken manuscript? So again, you remember the master novel, we would think that there would be strong scenes here in the opening. Instead, we have about 10 pages here with nothing. So that is a weak opening. Probably the story starts about here where you have the first strong scene. Again, this is marking it in your terms. You're deciding what are your strongest chapters. So sometimes people will say, well, you know, there are some good things up here in that first opening. Yes, but if they're not strong enough to catch the reader's attention, they're not going to turn the pages to get down to page 50. So make sure the opening has something strong going on. Another mistake I often see is a weak ending. This is where there are no strong scenes at all in Act 3. Oh my gosh, Act 3 should have the longest, the biggest scene. This is the climax of the story. One lady did this, and she came to me and she said, you know, I don't think I wrote an ending. No, I don't think she did. So this is an easy way to see that and to fix it before you try to submit it. This is another common problem that I see where you start out with a bang, you end with a bang, and oh, that dreaded sagging middle. Not enough is happening in this middle part right here. So again, you're going to have to go back and do something to fix that. You don't want your reader just to follow you for about 20 pages and then put the book down and never pick it up again. So this is a real example from my work in progress, Blue Marbles. It's a science fiction story, and the premise is this. Earth finally hears from space. You only live on land. Allow us to live in the oceans. So here is my 7 strongest chapters. I have a 70,000 word novel, so I marked 7. So I have a good opening. The end of Act 1 is good. Then this seems to be off a little bit. Maybe this stronger chapter should be pushed down just a little bit farther, and there should be other things happening here. And then this may not be quite strong enough to carry us from Act 3 to Act 4, but the ending looks pretty strong. So I think I've got to go back and check Act 2 and just see, you know, is it the best structure? Are the things going on that I want to be going on? Am I still holding the reader's attention? I think probably that right here is a subplot climax, so I think that's Act 4 is pretty good. But that's the sorts of things that I'm looking at. Is I'm going, okay, this is where I need to check and see what's going on and why is this coming a little bit earlier than what I would normally expect. Another thing that you can mark is when your antagonists and protagonists are in direct conflict. A lot of times what I see in manuscripts is that the villain comes along in the opening and the villain is in the ending, but the villain doesn't show up anywhere in Act 2. Okay, so what we need is the antagonist and protagonist to be in direct conflict all of the time. Now you'll see that there are a couple shades of the yellow here that I used. That's because the role of the antagonist is split between a father and son in my story. So they are both villains. Sometimes the main character is dealing with the father and sometimes he's dealing with the son. So I just went ahead and marked both of them on this, and I think it works in the context of my story. So I'm bending my rules just a little bit there and having a antagonist, that's fine. This is not set in stone. It's not only one way to do it. Just do what works for you. Pink, of course, for the romance plot. I just wanted to be sure that the romance was working, and you saw the girl enough throughout the story. She has a nice big opening appropriately. It doesn't come at the very first. You need to set up the main plot first because the romance is a subplot, but then it comes along. So I think this one is working pretty good. We also have a wrap up of the subplot of the romance there, which is great. Oh, what happened to it? Well, for some reason, I'm not seeing the character arc. Another thing that I will mark sometimes is the character arc. And for that, I will just notice places where the character is going from irresponsible to responsible. And I will write with very big letters on here. He's acting irresponsibly, and by the end, he's acting responsibly. And then what are the stages to go through it to get him to that point? Sometimes you can mark lots of things on the manuscript. That's fine. Um, Judy here has marked lots of things. I don't even know for sure what the things are, but she has her own key, and that's what you need to do is develop your own key. Red means something to her. The lime green means something, and the dark green means something. So you can mark up multiple things at once, and that will tell you the overall structure and how things are working. If there's sort of a lull and you don't have the strongest chapters there, maybe that's a subplot that is important, and maybe it's a small character moment. So it's not that there's rights and wrongs here. It's just in the context of your story. Are you pleased with how this is working out? And that's what you need to do is to make the Shrunken manuscript your own. I marked 4 things. I marked the strongest plot chapters, the antagonist versus protagonist, the subplots, and the character arc. You could mark dialogue. Where do certain people have interaction? Or just mark all of the dialogue so you can see, are you dialogue heavy or are you about where you want to be? You can mark any kind of scene structure, so take a smaller section of the novel and do that. Or you could I've even seen shrinking and marking up a picture book manuscript. That's a very interesting thing to do since they're already small, but it does work for that one also. So you can use it for anything you want to, as long as it's a tool that will help you see what's going on in your story, and that's really the goal of it. And so I will be teaching the Master Novel class at Highlights Foundation this summer, and we do have just a couple openings left. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about that. In the mornings, we're going to have a lot of different activities, and in the afternoon will be all writing time, and then in the evenings will be critiques of the day's writing. So we'll be doing critiques, reading over your shoulder. We'll be role playing. We'll do a lot of tools for you to use, such as the Shrunken manuscript. I will be looking over your shoulder while you're writing and noticing small things that help. And what my technique is to do that and make comments right then. So you have the critique in context. I don't sit down usually with people for a 15 to 30-minute formal critique. I don't think it works as well. What I'm really trying to do is to teach you in the context of your own story to go, what is my opinion about this? I think when you learn to trust your own judgment, then your career is going to really take off. An editor once told me, in this business, you live or die by your opinion. What I'm trying to do is to help you develop your opinion and stand by your opinion. Yes, this is the story I want to tell, and this is how I want to tell it. That's what you should come away from this retreat with. If you've not been to the barn, oh my gosh, it is fabulous. I frequently tell people that in the children's book world, eventually all roads lead to Honesdale, Pennsylvania. The classes held there, it's a great environment. Everyone is encouraging. The food is great. The lodgings are great. Oh, the chef is wonderful. If you've not been there, it's great. And the price is all inclusive. So there are limited spaces available. Only 8 people can attend, but we do have a couple openings. So send us a manuscript. If you don't have a complete novel, if you're not published already, we're looking at a sample chapter, and we're looking for just a couple more people. My motto is I believe in your story, and I'm really anxious to read some of your stories. Thank you.